Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be chatting about my favorite eyeshadow palettes that I tried in 2020. I am so excited to do this video because you guys know eyeshadow palettes are my favorite topic when it comes to makeup. And also this video is in collaboration with Sally Choi, and I got to know Sally first as a viewer. She used to comment on my videos and we would chat back and forth, and then all of a sudden I realized she had her own channel, so I went to check it out and absolutely fell in love with her videos. She's just so cheerful and energetic, and watching her videos puts me in a good mood. She's so much fun to watch, and she also does a lot of eyeshadow palette videos, which is why I think this was the perfect collab for us. If you like the videos I do where I talk about new eyeshadow palette releases that come out and then dupe it with things in my collection, you'll really love her channel because she does those all the time. Her swatches are amazing. She's just really fun to watch, so definitely head over and check out her channel. I'll leave it linked down in the description box below, and let's go ahead and get into it. And these are in no particular order. I thought about ranking all the palettes I tried in 2020, but that video would just be way too long. So here I'm just kind of choosing my favorites, the ones that I reached for the most throughout the year, and I love them all for different reasons, which we will get into in the video. And towards the end, I'll go ahead and highlight maybe like my top 3, the ones that I think were the best of the best this year and the ones that I would recommend. So let's go ahead and start with, I guess, number 1, a drugstore palette, and this is the LA Girl Pro Artistry palette. So these came out back in, I think, the late winter, maybe early spring of 2020, and it was this one and also one called Mastery. And when I first got these two, the Mastery one kind of spoke to me a little bit more with the color story, but as I started using it, and this happens all the time, sometimes I love a color story, but then it's not as useful to me over the long run, and I actually think I like this one a little bit more. So the Mastery palette had a really beautiful rosy toned vibe, but I noticed that a lot of the looks I got with it just looked kind of reddish and pinkish. Honestly, not my favorite color combination on my eyes. So this one I thought just was much more user-friendly. I thought it was a lot more versatile. I can get tons of different types of looks out of it. In here you have some blues, some greens, you have some basic neutrals, you have some warm tones, some cool tones. I just thought that this was a really versatile palette, and I found myself reaching for it quite often. And not only is the color story really pretty, but the formula on these LA Girl palettes is so incredibly good, especially when it comes to drugstore. I feel like drugstore has just come such a long way from those dry and powdery and dusty formulas that they used to have. These shimmers are creamy, they're buttery, they are super metallic on your eye, they're really foiled, and the matte shades are also very blendable, but at the same time nicely pigmented. I can't get over how much I've been loving these LA Girl palettes as a whole. They've come out with quite a few. I know some of them are discontinued or harder to get now, but these are still available, at least on the Ulta website, so I will link those down below. They might also be available at LA Girl's website as well. But this one was definitely an awesome find in 2020. Another one that looks very similar to it actually is the Sigma Untamed palette. And this one came out, I believe, in the summertime, and it has a really similar vibe. So if you like the look of this one but don't want to spend the money, then the LA Girl is definitely your best bet. But this one does have some differences also that make it a little bit more unique. This one has some beautiful lavenders in it that the LA Girl one doesn't have. There's one here as well. It also has this beautiful mustard colored matte, which I used with the color above it all the time, this beautiful gold. And I think even though this has a very similar color story with the green and the blue and the neutrals, like the warm tones, it also, I feel like, is a little bit more subdued when it comes to the color story. These aren't quite as bright as the ones in the LA Girl palette. So when you look at the swatches, you can tell it's just a little bit more toned down. And I think it's great if you want to try color, but you don't want to wear anything too bright on your eyes. I think these are kind of more earthy tones and easier to wear. And I thought the formula was beautiful on this one too. I just love the variety between this one and that LA Girl palette. You can just get so many different types of looks with it, and you can combine the colors, or you can get some really monochromatic looks as well, like an all lavender look or an all green, etc. So this was another really, really good one for 2020. Another palette I've had so much fun with this year in 2020 is the Tiny Marvels palette from Sydney Grace. You guys know I love Sydney Grace. I talk about them all the time, and this was the collab that they did with Mel Thompson, and I thought this color story was so beautiful. As much as I love the Enduring Love palette, that one can get a little bit darker, especially towards like one side of the palette, so I tend to stick to the lighter colors, and I loved that the color story of this one was mostly a little bit brighter. It was definitely more of a summertime vibe, and there are also a couple of deeper shades in here, like this one, Scarab, is one of the most gorgeous duochrome colors ever, and it's a little bit more deep and smoky, but overall I thought that this was just a very wearable palette, especially for somebody like me who has a lighter skin tone. Not to mention the formula of Sydney Grace is phenomenal. It's definitely worth trying if you haven't already. I know some indie brands can be hit or miss. Sydney Grace has never let me down when it comes to their eyeshadow formula. They are incredible. Another palette that has kind of a similar vibe to the Sydney Grace one is the Too Faced Pumpkin Spice palette. So I buy these Too Faced palettes when they come out every single year in the fall time, and this one was just so beautiful. I know they had initially gotten some backlash because people felt like for a pumpkin palette it wasn't orange enough, but to be honest with you, I was so glad that they kind of left that color story in the past, because those orangey and red warm tones were so a couple of years ago, and I love that they included some of these beautiful pinks and purples and the greens too. And I thought that this was really appropriate for fall, because these are all colors that you see in the fall, especially around here in New England. So I loved this palette. I love that it has both the warm tones and the cool tones. You can just get so many different looks out of this. It's super versatile, and the formula on these palettes is always wonderful. It's very easy to work with. I think the shimmers are very pigmented. They show up easily. They have that nice buttery rich feel, and the matte shades as well are very easy to blend and highly pigmented. So this was another one I enjoyed so much in 2020. Next up, when it comes to mini palettes, I think we can all agree that e.l.f. pretty much cornered the market when it came to their little $3 bite-sized palettes. I think those were probably one of the best finds of 2020. I already talked about them though in my best under $10 in 2020 video, so I'll go ahead and link that video in case you want to check it out. But other than those, there was a mini palette that I thought was absolutely beautiful that came out this year, and that was the Natasha Denona Mini Retro palette. So this one came out back in the spring. I remember doing a video on it sometime back, I think in March and April, and it has the most beautiful color story. These are the colors that I gravitate toward all the time. I think they pair beautifully with my more cool toned complexion. And even though I like this whole palette and I use every single shade, I think these grayish greens are what really make this for me and make it a little bit more standout, because I don't have colors exactly like this in my collection. I do have a lot of green shadows, but even though these look green, they kind of go on a little bit grayish, and it's just a really unique color. And I find myself reaching for this one a lot when I want cooler tone looks. And even though it's so small, I find that I can still get a pretty good variety of looks out of it, because I can do something that just has these greens, or I could do something just pink, or I can combine the two colors together and do a green and pink look. So it's definitely not just a one-trick pony. You can definitely do a couple of different things with it. Another smaller palette I had to mention is this one from Collidos. This is their Futurism 7 Sashimi City palette. And if you like neutrals, I think you would really love this one as well. It has the most gorgeous kind of warm neutral color story. The shimmer shades in particular in this palette are stunning. They look so metallic. They have a gorgeous duochrome shift to them, and they make a really big impact. And I love Kaleidos formula as well. Their matte shades have this really velvety, rich type of quality that is just unbelievably pigmented, but at the same time, it's easy to blend. And sometimes really pigmented shadows can be tough to work with. I have no issues with these at all, and I'm not the best at blending, so if I think they're easy to work with, they definitely are. And the shimmer shades in this palette kind of feel a little bit like those toppers that I don't enjoy, but they're not hard to pick up, and they pack a punch on your eyes. So even though they have that feel, they don't act like those toppers, they act like a regular shimmer shade. So overall, I loved the different looks that I made with this palette this year. So now that we just talked about mini palettes, let's talk about two larger palettes that came out this year that I was really impressed with. The first one is the BH Cosmetics Naughty palette. This one has 30 shades in it. It's ginormous, and not just the amount of shades, but the actual palette itself is huge. So that might be a detractor for some of you guys who don't like storing big palettes, or if you just feel overwhelmed by larger palettes. But I just felt like the formula of this one was super impressive, and the variety that you get, again, is phenomenal. You have such a nice selection of warm and cool tones. And in recent years, BH Cosmetics formula has completely blown me away, from their travel palettes to this one. They can absolutely compete with high-end shadows due to how pigmented they are and how well they blend on the eyes. And I just thought that this one was a great value, especially for how many shadows you're getting in here. And another one that I really enjoyed that was also a larger palette was Stone Cold Fox from Colourpop. This one, if you are more of a neutral lover, it's amazing, especially if you like cooler tone shadows. They had originally come out with the That's Taupe palette earlier in the year, and that one's a little 9-pan palette. So if this overwhelms you, but you like cool tones, then I would definitely check that one out. But this one is kind of just like a bigger version of That's Taupe. I felt like it has very similar shades and then some. And I loved this one because it actually included grays, and I feel like gray shadows are so hard to find in palettes these days. A lot of cooler tone palettes tend to go for like lavender or taupe, and this one actually had the grays in there, which I loved. And it also has the more pinky colors and the taupes as well. And I think if you're somebody like me who reaches for neutrals on an everyday basis, this is a great one just because of the variety it has in here. Now, if you like more warm tones, I would check out the Bare Necessities palette, because that was kind of like the sister palette of this one. It looks very similar as far as the setup and the layout goes, but it has warmer toned options. But if you like more of the cool tones, definitely check out this one. Another palette that just came out recently, but I am so in love with it, it is the Novelist Side by Side palette. So this one I think leans more to the warm tone side of things, but it does have a couple of cooler tone options as well. This whole bottom row is definitely more cool leaning. And this color story actually reminded me a little bit of the Natasha Denona Biba palette. And as much as I love the color story of the Biba palette, I wasn't as crazy about the formula. I felt like a lot of those shadows were hard to work with, and she included some of those cream shadows that tend to dry up and kind of go on really sheer. So I much prefer this one because not only is Nabla's formula incredible, but it's also more affordable as well. And I've just had so much fun playing with this one. So this is another great find for 2020. The next palette's only been out for a couple of weeks now. It's a little bit more of a late release for 2020, but it's become one of my favorites already, and that is the Child palette from Colourpop. I've been using this like nonstop since I got it. If you like green shadows, this is one of the prettiest palettes I have tried in a really, really long time. Even though it's green, it's not completely green. You have some neutrals in there as well if you wanted to ground your look. And generally I do mix them with the neutrals in this palette because they pair so well together. If I'm using the matte green shades, I'll usually put like the neutral gold on my eyes, or if I'm using some of the matte neutrals, then I'll put a green shade on my lid. And I just love how everything comes out every single time. I think the formula is really great in here, like always. So this one was kind of a last minute surprise in 2020. And last but definitely not least, because I have to say this was my favorite palette of the year, and that's the Natasha Denona Glam palette. So this one came out a couple of months ago now, and I used this probably more than any of the palettes that I showed you today because number one, I love my neutrals, and number two, I just felt like this was so easy to use and so well put together and well thought out. And I know a lot of you guys are not going to agree with me on this point, but I love that it has more shimmer shades in it than matte shades. And here's why, because when I'm doing an eyeshadow look, I feel like the mattes are just in the background for me. I always put a shimmer shade on my lid. I rarely do just an all matte look. So I feel like the shimmer shade is really what makes the look. It's the shade that's on your eyelid, it's on the biggest part, and the mattes are just kind of in my crease or the outer corner, but they're just kind of there performing their function, but they're not what you actually notice as much. And so the fact that this one is mostly shimmer shades really appeals to me because I feel like I can get so many different looks out of it just using the different shimmer shades on my lid. So you do have your basic standard matte shades. You have an ivory color, you have a lighter transition, you have some deeper ones for the outer corner, you have a couple mid-tones, And that's pretty much it. So I just create a base look using those few matte shades that it has. And then I can just take one of these shimmer shades, pop it on my lid, and have a completely different look every time. And I can do something smoky with some of the darker shimmers, or something light and bright with some of the lighter ones. I know I've seen some people express disappointment with that they felt like the shimmers don't pop enough. And I definitely love a shimmer shade that pops, as I talked about in some of the other palettes. But when I want something that is just more easy and casual, or like if I'm going to see family and I don't want to look all glammed up, but I want to look nice, these shimmer shades are just that little subtle bit of shimmer that's not going to be like anything over dramatic. And as I get older, I feel like I appreciate shadows like that even more. So I love this palette, and it's definitely my most used and favorite palette of 2020. And it'll definitely carry on into the new year also as being a favorite. So overall, if I had to pick like maybe my top 3, I would say probably this one, Stone Cold Fox, definitely, because I use these two a ton, and maybe the Nabla side by side. I would say these are the 3 that I've been using the most out of all of these palettes. If I had to go into 4th place, I might pick the Child, but I haven't had this one long enough to know if I'm really going to use it a lot or if it's just the novelty of it right now. But I love this one as well. So anyway, guys, those are all my favorites. I forgot to mention as well that I do have some more in-depth videos on some of these palettes that I showed. With the Natasha Denona, I did a whole video on this compared to some other palettes in my collection. Also, I did one similar with Stone Cold Fox. And I did another one like that with the Pumpkin Spice palette, and found a ton of dupes for this one if you didn't want to necessarily run right out and buy it. So definitely check those out. I will link them down below. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button. And also, if you're not subscribed to my channel yet, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button on your way out so that you don't miss any future videos. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you all in my next one. Take care. Bye.